Rain slammed against the glass. The room went silent. Then Lucia Moretti heard the words that would destroy her life, spoken in a language they thought no one else understood. 3 cartel hitmen sat across from New York's most dangerous crime boss, pretending to negotiate wine imports while planning his execution before midnight. She was just a waitress refilling glasses. She had 10 seconds to decide, walk away and let a man die, or whisper a warning that would paint a target on her back forever. She leaned close to Damien Castellano's ear and chose blood over silence. The room exploded. Gunfire shattered crystal. Bodies hit the floor. And when the smoke cleared, the most feared man in New York looked at her like she had just saved more than his life. Want to know what happened next? Stick around till the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Papos. The rain started around 7. By 8:30, water hammered against the tall windows of Vittorio's 5th-floor private dining suite, hard enough to blur the Manhattan skyline into streaks of gold and red. Lucia Moretti moved between tables carrying a tray of wine glasses that cost more than her monthly rent, keeping her head down, her steps quiet, her presence invisible. That was the job. Rich men didn't want to see the help. They wanted refills that appeared without asking and plates cleared without interruption. Lucia had learned the rhythm years ago, how to read a room, anticipate needs, fade into expensive wallpaper. She was good at it. Good enough that Antonio, the restaurant's owner, trusted her with the private suites where Manhattan's elite spent $20,000 on dinner and never blinked. Tonight's party occupied the largest suite. 8 men in tailored suits sat around a polished mahogany table beneath a crystal chandelier that threw fractured light across their faces. Wine bottles lined the center of the table. Bordeaux, Barolo. Something Italian she couldn't pronounce that cost $3,000 a bottle. Lucia poured carefully, moving from seat to seat with practiced efficiency. The men barely glanced at her. She preferred it that way. Most of the conversation flowed in English, business talk, import logistics, shipping routes through Newark and Philadelphia. Lucia let the words wash over her without sticking. She'd heard 1,000 versions of the same discussion. Wealthy men negotiating deals they'd close with handshakes and wire transfers, talking about profit margins like they were discussing baseball scores. Then one of the men switched languages. Lucia's hand froze mid-pour. The man sitting closest to the window, lean, mid-40s, expensive watch glinting under the chandelier, leaned toward his companion and spoke in rapid, clipped Sicilian. Not Italian. Sicilian. The dialect her grandmother had spoken in the cramped Brooklyn kitchen where Lucia had spent her childhood, learning words and phrases that sounded like music wrapped in barbed wire. She kept pouring, didn't react, didn't let her expression shift even a fraction, but her pulse kicked hard against her ribs. Before midnight, the man was saying. Castellano won't see it coming. He thinks this is a legitimate negotiation. Lucia's breath caught. Damien Castellano sat at the head of the table, broad-shouldered and stone-faced, dark eyes scanning a contract like he was reading the morning news. Everyone in New York knew the name. Crime lord, kingpin, the man who controlled half the underground trade flowing through the East Coast. Lucia had recognized him the moment he walked through the door 2 hours ago, flanked by 2 security guards who'd positioned themselves near the entrance like sentries. She'd served him wine. He'd nodded once, polite, distant. Now someone was planning to kill him. The second man responded in the same dialect, his voice low and cold. Mexican operation wants him gone. Clean sweep. They take the territory, we get the import routes. Everyone wins. Except Castellano. Especially Castellano. Lucia's hands trembled. She finished pouring and stepped back, setting the bottle on the serving cart near the wall. Her mind raced. These men weren't business partners. They were cartel. Assassins dressed in Armani, sitting across from their target, pretending to negotiate shipping contracts while plotting murder over expensive wine. And they thought no one could understand them. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The language is a gift, Lucia. It connects you to your roots. Guard it carefully. Lucia had guarded it. She'd never mentioned it at work, never used it outside her grandmother's kitchen. Most people assumed she only spoke English, maybe a little basic Italian for the tourists who wandered into Vittorio looking for authentic pasta and Chianti. No one knew. No one except her grandmother, who'd been dead 3 years now. Lucia glanced toward the door. The security guard stood motionless, watching the room with the flat, unreadable expressions of men paid to notice everything. But they didn't speak Sicilian. They didn't know what she knew. She could walk away, finish her shift, collect her tips, go home to her studio apartment in Astoria, and pretend she'd never heard a word. No one would blame her. No one would even know. But Damien Castellano would be dead before sunrise. And the cartel would take over half of New York's underworld in a single night. Lucia's stomach twisted. She picked up a fresh wine bottle and moved back toward the table, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone in the room could hear it. She circled around the mahogany surface, refilling glasses with steady hands that betrayed nothing. When she reached Damien's seat, she leaned close, closer than a waitress should, close enough to smell expensive cologne and cigarette smoke. "It's a setup," she whispered in English, her voice barely audible over the rain hammering the windows. "They're going to kill you tonight." Damien's dark eyes snapped toward her. For one frozen second, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Then everything exploded. The lean man near the window lunged to his feet, his hand diving inside his jacket. One of the security guards shouted something sharp and brutal. Glass shattered. A chair crashed backward. Damien moved faster than Lucia thought possible, shoving the table forward with enough force to send wine bottles flying, while his other hand grabbed her wrist and yanked her down behind the mahogany barrier. Gunfire erupted, loud, deafening, the sound of the world ripping apart. Lucia hit the floor hard, her knees slamming against marble as bullets punched through wood and crystal above her head. The chandelier exploded in a cascade of glass shards that rained down like jagged snow. Men were shouting, some in English, some in Spanish, some in languages she didn't recognize. The air smelled like gunpowder and spilled wine. Damien's security guards returned fire with brutal precision. The lean man near the window went down first, blood blooming across his white shirt as he collapsed against the glass. His companion tried to run, made it 3 steps before a bullet caught him in the spine and dropped him face first onto the carpet. The third assassin managed to pull a knife. He lunged across the table toward Damien with the wild desperation of a man who knew he was already dead. Damien caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted hard, and drove the blade into the man's throat with the cold efficiency of someone who'd done it before. Blood sprayed across the white tablecloth. The body hit the floor. And then, silence. Lucia's ears rang. Her hands shook so violently she had to press them flat against the marble to keep them still. The room reeked of blood and smoke. Shattered glass covered every surface. 3 men lay dead or dying near the windows, while rain continued hammering against the glass like the world outside hadn't noticed anything had changed. Damien crouched beside her, breathing hard, his suit jacket torn and blood-spattered. "You speak Sicilian," he said. It wasn't a question. Lucia nodded, unable to force words past her throat. Damien stared at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face like he was trying to read something written in a language only he understood. Then he stood, pulling her upright with one hand while his security team moved through the room, checking bodies and securing the doors. "What's your name?" Damien asked. "Lucia." Her voice came out raw. "Lucia Moretti. You just saved my life, Lucia Moretti." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what to say to any of this. One of the security guards approached, tall, square-jawed, moving with the precise economy of a soldier. "Building's locked down. NYPD will be here in 5 minutes. We need to move." Damien didn't look away from Lucia. "She comes with us." "Boss, she comes with us," Damien repeated, his tone allowing no argument. "The cartel heard her voice. They'll know someone warned me. She's a target now." The words hit Lucia like a fist to the chest. A target. She'd been a waitress 90 seconds ago, anonymous, invisible, safe. Now 3 men were dead, and somewhere in the smoke and chaos, her entire life had burned down to ash. "I don't," Lucia started. "You don't have a choice," Damien interrupted, not unkindly. "You stepped into my world. You saved my life. That means the people who wanted me dead now want you dead too. So you're coming with me, and we're going to figure out how to keep you breathing long enough to fix this." Lucia's legs felt unsteady, her vision blurred at the edges. Everything was moving too fast, too loud, too violent, too real. She wanted to argue, wanted to run, wanted to rewind the last 5 minutes and choose silence instead of survival, but she'd made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Okay, she whispered. Damien nodded once, then turned toward his security team. Get her out through the kitchen. Marco stays with her until I finish with the police. No one talks to her. No one sees her. Understood? Understood. The square-jawed guard, Marco, took Lucia's arm gently but firmly and steered her toward the service entrance. She moved on autopilot, her mind spinning through fragments of memory. The lean man's voice, the gunfire, the blood spreading across white linen. Damien's hand gripping her wrist hard enough to leave bruises. You saved my life. Behind her, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Lucia didn't look back. The safe house sat on the edge of the Hudson River in a neighborhood where brownstones cost $8 million and everyone minded their own business. Marco drove her there in a black SUV with tinted windows, taking routes through back streets and industrial zones where security cameras didn't reach. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just drove with the grim focus of a man following orders. When they finally pulled into an underground garage, Lucia's hands had stopped shaking. Her brain had kicked into survival mode, the same mode that had carried her through her grandmother's death, her parents' abandonment, 2 evictions, and 3 years working doubles at Vittorio to keep her head above water. Panic was a luxury. Right now she needed to think. Marco led her upstairs to a furnished apartment that looked like something out of an interior design magazine. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and white, a kitchen stocked with food she couldn't afford on a year's salary. Stay here, Marco said. Don't go near the windows. Don't open the door for anyone except me or the boss. You need something. There's a phone on the counter, direct line. How long? Lucia asked. How long what? How long am I supposed to stay here? Marco's expression didn't change. Until the boss says otherwise. Then he left. The door locked behind him with a heavy click that sounded too much like a prison cell. Lucia stood in the middle of the empty apartment, listening to the silence press against her ears. Outside the windows, Manhattan glittered across the water, a million lights burning in the darkness, indifferent to the violence unfolding in its shadows. She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. 3 men were dead. She'd watched them die. And now she was locked inside a safe house owned by the most dangerous crime boss in New York, waiting for someone to decide whether she'd survive the next 24 hours. Lucia set the glass down and pressed her palms flat against the granite countertop, forcing herself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her grandmother had taught her during panic attacks when the world felt too big and too cruel and too loud. You're stronger than you think, Piccola. You've got my blood. We survive. Lucia had survived. She'd survived poverty, abandonment, grief, and a city that chewed people up and spit them out without mercy. She could survive this, too. She had to. Because the alternative was a bullet in the back of her head and a body that would never be found. Damien arrived 3 hours later. Lucia heard the door unlock, heard footsteps crossing the hardwood, and turned to find him standing in the kitchen doorway, still wearing the blood-spattered suit from Vittorio. He looked exhausted, older than he'd seemed at the restaurant. Lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth, his shoulders carrying weight that had nothing to do with muscle. You okay? He asked. The question was so absurd, Lucia almost laughed. 3 people died in front of me tonight, she said. I'm locked in a stranger's apartment because a Mexican cartel wants me dead, so no, I'm not okay. Damien nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. Fair. He moved to the counter and poured himself a drink. Whiskey, neat, from a bottle that probably cost more than her car. He drank half of it in one swallow, then set the glass down and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Tell me how you learned Sicilian, he said. Lucia hesitated. My grandmother, she was born in Palermo, came to Brooklyn when she was 16. She taught me the language growing up, said it was important to remember where we came from. She teach you anything else? How to cook, how to read people, how to survive in a world that doesn't give a damn whether you live or die. Damien's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Smart woman. She was. She still alive? No, died 3 years ago, cancer. I'm sorry. The words sounded genuine, like he actually meant them. Lucia didn't know what to do with that, didn't know what to do with any of this. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the river through the windows, watching light shimmer on black water. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Damien finished his drink. "Now we figure out who those men were working for, how deep the cartel's infiltration goes, and whether they know your name yet. Then we decide how to fix it. And if they already know, then we fix it faster." Lucia turned to face him. "You're talking about killing people." "I'm talking about survival," Damien corrected. "The cartel sent 3 assassins to kill me in a public restaurant. They don't play by rules, they don't negotiate. They kill anyone who gets in their way, and right now, you're in their way. So yeah, if it comes down to them or you, I'm choosing you, every single time." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down Lucia's spine. Not fear, something else, something dangerous. "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me. I'm just a waitress who happened to speak the right language at the right time. Why are you protecting me?" Damien looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Because you saved my life when you could have walked away," he said finally. "And because I don't leave people behind, especially not the ones who risk everything to do the right thing." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, complicated, wrapped in meanings Lucia couldn't untangle. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need protection, didn't need his help, didn't want anything to do with his violent world. But that would be a lie. The truth was simpler. She was terrified. And Damien Castellano was the only thing standing between her and a bullet. "Okay," Lucia said quietly. "What do I do?" "For now, you stay here. Stay safe. Let me handle the rest." "And after?" Damien's expression shifted, something dark and complicated flickering across his features. "After, we figure out if you want to go back to your old life, or if that life's already gone." The question settled into Lucia's chest like a stone. She thought about her studio apartment, her shifts at Vittorio, the quiet, invisible existence she'd built for herself in the margins of a city that never noticed her. That life felt 1,000 miles away now, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who hadn't watched 3 men die. Someone who hadn't whispered a warning that shattered everything. Damien crossed the room and stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to smell whiskey and smoke and something else she couldn't name. "Get some sleep," he said. "You're safe here. I promise." Then he turned and walked toward the door. Lucia's voice stopped him halfway. "Damien?" He looked back. "Thank you," she said, "for not leaving me behind." His expression softened. Just for a second. Just enough for her to see the exhaustion and grief and something almost human beneath the armor he wore like a second skin. "Thank you for saving my life, Lucia Moretti." Then he was gone. The door locked behind him, and Lucia stood alone in the expensive silence, listening to the river whisper against the shore and wondering whether she'd just made the best decision of her life, or signed her own death warrant. Lucia didn't sleep. She lay in the king-size bed staring at the ceiling while Manhattan's glow bled through the curtains, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Her mind replayed the gunfire on an endless loop, the sound of bodies hitting marble, the way blood had spread across white linen like spilled wine. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the lean man's face. The moment the bullet hit him, the way his expression shifted from rage to nothing in the space between heartbeats. Around 4 in the morning, she gave up trying. She pulled on the clothes Marco had left for her, black jeans, a plain t-shirt, everything 2 sizes too big, and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The apartment felt too quiet, too clean, like a hotel room waiting for guests who would never arrive. Lucia made coffee she didn't want and stood at the windows watching the river turn from black to gray as dawn crept across the water. Somewhere out there, the cartel was hunting for her. Men with guns and connections and resources she couldn't begin to imagine, all focused on finding one waitress who'd destroyed their operation with 7 whispered words. "It's a setup. They're going to kill you tonight." She'd saved Damien's life and destroyed her own. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt numb, hollowed out, like she'd used up all her fear in those 90 seconds at Vittorio and had nothing left except the cold machinery of survival. Her phone buzzed. Lucia jumped, nearly dropping her coffee mug. She'd forgotten she even had it. Marco had returned it last night along with her jacket and purse, everything she'd left behind at the restaurant. The screen glowed with a text from Antonio, Vittorio's owner. "Where are you? You missed your shift. Call me." 3 more messages sat beneath it, each one more irritated than the last. Lucia stared at the words like they were written in a foreign language. Her shift. She'd completely forgotten. In the space of 12 hours, her entire world had been ripped apart and rebuilt around violence and safe houses and crime lords, and Antonio was worried about whether she'd show up to pour wine for rich tourists. The disconnect was so absurd she almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she typed a quick response. "Family emergency? Need a few days. Sorry." She hit send before she could overthink it. Then she blocked his number. Because whatever life she'd had at Vittorio, the invisible waitress carrying trays through Manhattan's elite, that person was gone. Dead. Buried beneath the same shattered crystal and spilled blood that had destroyed Damien's dinner meeting. The door unlocked behind her. Lucia spun around, her heart slamming into her throat. Marco stepped inside carrying 2 paper bags that smelled like breakfast. He looked exactly the same as last night. Dark suit, expressionless face, military posture, like he'd been carved from stone and programmed to follow orders without question. "Boss wants to see you," Marco said, setting the bags on the counter. "Eat first, then we move." "Move where?" "His office, downtown. He's got information." Lucia's stomach tightened. "About the cartel?" Marco didn't answer, just pulled a gun from his jacket, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and slid it back into the holster beneath his arm. The gesture was casual, routine, like checking his phone or tying his shoes. "Eat," he repeated. "You've got 15 minutes. Then he walked to the windows and stood there with his back to her, watching the river like he expected enemies to come crawling out of the water. Lucia forced herself to eat. The food tasted like cardboard, but she chewed mechanically, swallowing without tasting, fueling her body the way you'd fill a car with gas. Functional, necessary, nothing more. When she finished, Marco drove her through Brooklyn in the same black SUV, taking routes that doubled back on themselves, cutting through alleys and side streets where Puras couldn't track them. The city was waking up, garbage trucks rumbling past, coffee shops opening their doors, people in business suits hurrying toward subway stations with their eyes locked on phones. Normal. Everything looked so goddamn normal, like the world hadn't shattered last night. Like violence and death weren't woven into the fabric of the city, so deep you could never scrub them out. Damien's office occupied the top floor of a building in Tribeca that looked legitimate from the outside. Glass and steel, modern architecture, a brass plaque near the entrance that read Castellano International Imports. Marco bypassed the lobby entirely, steering Lucia through a side entrance and up a freight elevator that opened directly into a penthouse suite. Inside, everything was sharp edges and dark wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A conference table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by leather chairs. Security monitors lined one wall, displaying feeds from what looked like warehouses, shipping docks, and city streets. Damien stood near the windows with his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, clipped Italian. He'd changed clothes. Fresh suit, no bloodstains, hair still damp from a shower. But the exhaustion remained carved into his shoulders, the weight of command pressing down like gravity. He ended the call and turned as Marco and Lucia entered. "Leave us," Damien said. Marco hesitated. "Boss, leave us, Marco." Marco's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving Lucia alone with the man whose life she'd saved and whose world she'd been dragged into whether she wanted it or not. Damien crossed to the conference table and pulled out a chair. "Sit." Lucia sat. He settled into the chair across from her, close enough that she could see the dark circles under his eyes, the tension radiating from every line of his body. He looked like a man who'd been awake for 72 hours straight and had no intention of sleeping until the war was over. "We've got a problem," Damien said without preamble. "Just one?" Lucia's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. Damien's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "The 3 men you identified last night, they're connected to the Sinaloa cartel, Mexican operation trying to expand into East Coast territory. They've been making moves for months, but this was the first direct attempt on my life. And now they know someone warned you." "Now they know someone warned me," Damien confirmed. My people intercepted communications this morning. The cartel's scrambling. They're looking for whoever blew their operation. They don't have your name yet, but they will. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Depends on how fast they work. Lucia's chest tightened. So what do? We make you disappear. The words hit like a slap. Disappear, Lucia repeated slowly. Damien leaned forward, his dark eyes locked on hers. New identity, new city. Enough money to start over somewhere the cartel won't find you. Chicago, Seattle, somewhere far enough away that you're not worth the resources to hunt down. You want me to run? I want you to survive. Lucia stared at him, her mind spinning. Part of her, the rational, terrified part, wanted to say yes immediately. Take the money. Take the new name, like vanish into some anonymous Midwestern city and spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, but at least she'd be alive. But another part of her, the part that sounded like her grandmother's voice, recoiled at the idea. Running meant losing everything, her city, her language, her identity. It meant admitting the cartel had won. No, Lucia said. Damien blinked. No? I'm not running. Lucia, I'm not running, she repeated, her voice harder now. I've spent my entire life being invisible, being nothing, letting the world push me around because I didn't have the power to push back. But I saved your life last night. I made a choice, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my existence hiding from the consequences. Damien studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You understand what you're saying. If you stay, you're choosing war. The cartel won't stop. They'll come after you with everything they've got. Then we hit them first. The words came out before Lucia fully realized she'd made the decision. But once they were spoken, she couldn't take them back. Didn't want to take them back. She was done being the victim, done being the person things happened to. If she was going to die, she'd die on her feet. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then teach me. Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Finally, Damien stood and walked to the windows, staring out at the city sprawling below. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. My father used to say there are two kinds of people in this world, prey and predators. Prey spend their lives running. Predators decide what they want and take it. Consequences be damned. He turned to face her. You've been prey your whole life, Lucia. You sure you want to become something else? Lucia thought about the lean man at Vittorio, the way he'd spoken about murder like it was a business transaction, the casual cruelty in his voice when he'd discussed killing Damien before midnight. These people didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't respect anything except power. Yes, she said. I'm sure. Damien held her gaze for another beat, then nodded slowly. All right, then we do this my way. You follow orders, you learn fast, and you don't question me when lives are on the line. Understood? Understood. Good. Damien pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. Marco's going to take you to one of my secure locations. You're going to meet some people who can teach you what you need to know. Self-defense. Weapons. How to read a room and spot threats before they become problems. You've got natural instincts. Last night proved that. But instincts won't keep you alive when someone puts a gun to your head. Lucia's pulse quickened. How long? As long as it takes. And what are you going to do? Damien's expression hardened. I'm going to find out exactly how deep the cartels infiltrated my organization. Someone leaked the meeting location. Someone told them where I'd be and when. That means I've got a traitor inside my own operation, and I'm going to dig them out root and stem. The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver down Lucia's spine. This was the man the city whispered about, the crime lord who'd built an empire on fear and violence and absolute control. For a moment, she glimpsed the predator beneath the expensive suit, the part of him that had survived decades in a world where weakness meant death. When you find them, Lucia asked quietly, what happens? Damien's eyes were black ice. They stopped being a problem. The training facility sat in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, hidden behind rusting shipping containers and graffiti-covered walls that made it look abandoned. Marco led Lucia inside through a side entrance that required 3 separate security checks: retinal scan, fingerprint, and a passcode only he knew. The interior was nothing like the exterior. Clean concrete floors, fluorescent lights, a shooting range along one wall, padding and training mats spread across another, weights and equipment organized with military precision. The space smelled like gun oil and sweat. A woman waited near the shooting range. She was maybe 40, lean and compact, with short dark hair and scars cutting across her knuckles like she'd spent years punching things that punched back. She wore tactical pants and a black tank top that showed arms corded with muscle. "This her?" the woman asked Marco. "This is her." The woman circled Lucia slowly, studying her with the clinical detachment of a mechanic inspecting a broken engine. Lucia forced herself to stand still, meeting the woman's gaze without flinching. Finally, the woman stopped. "I'm Sophia. I'm going to teach you how not to die. You do exactly what I say, when I say it, and maybe you'll survive long enough to make this worth my time. You hesitate, you question, you whine. I'm done. Clear?" "Clear," Lucia said. "Good. Strip." Lucia blinked. "What?" "Your jacket. Take it off. I need to see what I'm working with." Lucia shrugged out of the oversized jacket and let it fall to the floor. Sophia grabbed her arms, turned them over, examined the muscle definition, or lack of it. She pressed fingers against Lucia's ribs, checked her stance, her balance, the way she distributed her weight. "You've never been in a real fight," Sophia said. It wasn't a question. "No." "Ever fired a gun?" "No." "Knife?" "No." Sophia stepped back and crossed her arms. "So you're completely useless." The words should have stung. Instead, Lucia felt something cold and sharp settle into her chest. "Then teach me to be useful." Sophia's expression shifted, just barely. A flicker of something that might have been approval. "All right, let's start with the basics. Someone grabs you from behind. What do you do?" Lucia opened her mouth to answer, but Sophia was already moving. She spun behind Lucia faster than thought, arm locking around her throat in a chokehold that cut off her air supply instantly. Panic exploded through Lucia's nervous system. She clawed at Sophia's arm, trying to pull it away, her vision already starting to narrow at the edges. "Wrong," Sophia hissed in her ear. "You're already dead. Try again." She released the hold. Lucia gasped, stumbling forward, her throat burning. "Again," Sophia said. This time Lucia was ready. When Sophia grabbed her, she drove her elbow back hard into Sophia's ribs, twisted her hips, and dropped her weight. Sophia grunted, but didn't let go. Lucia stomped down on her instep with all the force she could muster. Sophia released her. "Better," Sophia said. "Still sloppy, still slow, but better." Again. They ran the drill 20 times, then 30, then 50. By the time Sophia called a break, Lucia's muscles were screaming and sweat poured down her back. Her throat felt raw. Her elbows ached. Every breath tasted like copper and exhaustion. Sophia tossed her a water bottle. "You've got decent instincts. Your body knows how to survive even if your brain hasn't caught up yet. That's good. Means you won't freeze when someone tries to kill you." Lucia drank half the bottle in one pull. "How long until I'm ready?" "Ready for what? A street fight? A month? Professional killers? 6 months minimum. The kind of people hunting you?" Sophia's expression turned grim. "You'll never be ready, but I can teach you enough to give you a chance. Whether you take it or not, that's on you." The honesty was brutal, but Lucia appreciated it more than empty reassurance. "Then let's keep going," she said. Sophia almost smiled. "All right, grab the Glock on the table. Time to learn how not to shoot yourself in the foot." Sabsim. 3 days blurred together. Lucia lived in the warehouse, slept on a cot in the back room, ate protein bars and instant coffee, while Sophia drilled her relentlessly on everything from hand-to-hand combat to firearms training to situational awareness. "Never sit with your back to a door," Sophia snapped during a break. "Always know your exits, count the people in every room. Notice who's watching you and who's ignoring you. The ones ignoring you are usually the most dangerous. Professionals don't stare." Lucia absorbed it all like a sponge soaking up water. She learned how to disarm someone holding a knife, how to break a chokehold 3 different ways, how to field strip a Glock and reassemble it in under 30 seconds, how to read body language and spot lies and understand the difference between someone who wanted to hurt her and someone who wanted to kill her. Her body ached constantly. Bruises bloomed across her ribs and arms. Her knuckles split and bled from hitting the heavy bag. She pulled muscles she didn't know she had and pushed through pain that would have sent her to the emergency room a week ago. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the gunfire at Vittorio. The blood. The bodies. The look in Damien's eyes when he'd pulled her behind the table and saved her life for the second time in as many minutes. On the fourth day, Damien showed up. Lucia was running combat drills with Sofia, practicing how to fight from the ground after being tackled. When the warehouse door opened and Damien walked in, flanked by Marco and another guard she didn't recognize. Sofia called a halt. Lucia climbed to her feet, breathing hard, her tank top soaked through with sweat. Damien's gaze swept over her, taking in the bruises, the split knuckles, the exhaustion carved into every line of her body, and something shifted in his expression. "She's learning fast," Sofia said. "Natural talent for violence. Surprised the hell out of me." "Can she handle herself?" Damien asked. "Against street thugs? Yeah. Against cartel sicarios? She'll need more time." Damien nodded slowly, then turned to Lucia. "We need to talk. Privately." Sofia jerked her head toward the back room. Lucia followed Damien inside, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the training. The room was small, just a cot, a folding chair, and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Damien closed the door behind them. "I found the leak," he said without preamble. Lucia's breath caught. "Who?" "Vincent Romano, one of my senior captains. He's been feeding information to the cartel for 6 months in exchange for a cut of their expansion profits. He's the one who gave them the restaurant location, the meeting time, everything." The name meant nothing to Lucia, but the betrayal in Damien's voice cut through the air like a blade. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Damien's expression was stone. "What I always do with traitors. Make an example." "You're going to kill him." "I'm going to kill everyone who helped him, his contacts, his runners, anyone who knew about the deal and didn't report it. I'm going to burn his entire network to ash and scatter the remains so thoroughly that no one in my organization will ever think about betrayal again." The words should have horrified her. Instead, Lucia felt something cold and satisfied settle in her chest. Vincent Romano had sold Damien out, had orchestrated an assassination attempt that would have left Damien dead and the cartel in control of half the East Coast. The man deserved whatever was coming. "When?" Lucia asked. "Tomorrow night. Romano's meeting with his cartel contacts at a warehouse in Newark. We're going to hit them all at once. Clean sweep." Damien paused, his dark eyes searching her face. "I want you there." Lucia's pulse spiked. "What?" "I want you there," Damien repeated. "You started this when you warned me at Vittorio. You chose to step into my world instead of running. This is what that world looks like: violence, consequences, blood. If you're going to survive, you need to understand exactly what you've signed up for. You want me to watch you kill people. I want you to see the truth. No filter, no sanitized version, just reality." Damien moved closer, his voice dropping. "Because if you can't handle this, Lucia, if you look at what I do and decide you want out, then we end it now. I'll send you to Seattle with a new name and enough money to disappear. But if you stay, there's no going back. You'll be part of this. Complicit. Just as guilty as I am." Lucia's throat tightened. She thought about her grandmother, about the quiet life she'd built in Brooklyn, cooking Sunday dinners and teaching Lucia to speak a language that would one day save a man's life. Her grandmother had survived poverty, immigration, decades of struggle in a city that chewed people up and spit them out. "We survive, Piccola. That's what we do." Lucia met Damien's gaze. "I'll be there." Something flickered across his expression. Relief, maybe, or respect. "Good," he said quietly, "because this is the point of no return. After tomorrow, you're mine, and I'm yours. Whatever happens next, we face it together." The weight of those words settled over Lucia like a shroud. She'd crossed the line, stepped from the world of normal people with normal lives into something darker, something violent, something that would mark her forever. But she'd made her choice, and she wasn't backing down. Much. The warehouse in Newark sat in an industrial zone where streetlights had been shot out years ago and never replaced. Damien's convoy arrived just after midnight, 3 black SUVs rolling through the darkness with their headlights off, moving like sharks through deep water. Lucia rode in the second vehicle with Damien and Marco. She wore tactical gear Sophia had given her. Dark clothes, boots that didn't make noise, a Kevlar vest that felt too heavy against her chest. A Glock sat in a holster at her hip, loaded and ready, even though Sophia had made her promise not to use it unless absolutely necessary. "You're there to observe," Sophia had said during the final briefing, "not to engage. You pull that gun, you better be ready to kill someone, because hesitation gets you dead." Lucia's hands trembled. She clenched them into fists, forcing her breathing to steady. Around her, Damien's men moved with the cold efficiency of soldiers, checking weapons, reviewing positions, speaking in low voices that carried no emotion, just tactical precision. Damien sat beside her, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "You can still walk away," he said quietly. "No judgment. No consequences." Lucia shook her head. "I'm not walking away." "Why not?" She turned to face him, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "Because these people tried to kill you. Because they're planning to flood my city with drugs and violence. Because Vincent Romano betrayed you for money and doesn't deserve mercy. And because if I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I was strong enough to do what needed to be done." Damien held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. The convoy stopped 3 blocks from the warehouse. Damien's men poured out of the vehicles in coordinated silence, spreading across the dark streets like shadows. Marco handed Lucia a radio earpiece that crackled with quiet chatter, position reports, security checks, confirmation signals. "Stay close to me," Damien said. "Don't move unless I tell you. Don't speak unless someone asks you a direct question. Understood?" "Understood." They approached the warehouse on foot. The building loomed against the night sky. Concrete and rusted metal, windows smashed out decades ago, graffiti covering every surface. Light leaked through cracks in the walls. Voices drifted from inside, speaking in Spanish and English, and something that might have been Italian. Damien's men surrounded the building, silent, invisible, waiting for the signal. Damien pulled out his phone and typed a single word, "Now." Everything exploded. Flash grenades detonated inside the warehouse, turning night into blinding white daylight. Men screamed, gunfire erupted, sharp, deafening cracks that echoed across the industrial zone like thunder. Damien's team stormed through every entrance simultaneously, moving with surgical precision. Lucia followed Damien through a side door, her heart slamming against her ribs hard enough to crack bone. Inside, chaos reigned. Men in tactical gear wrestled cartel soldiers to the ground. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness in strobing bursts. Someone was shouting orders in Spanish. Glass shattered. Metal clanged against concrete. And in the center of it all, Vincent Romano stood with his hands raised, surrounded by 3 of Damien's men with rifles trained on his chest. Damien crossed the warehouse floor like an avenging angel. Romano's face went white. "Damien, wait. I can explain." "Explain what?" Damien's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Explain how you sold me out to the cartel? How you gave them everything they needed to kill me? How you betrayed 30 years of loyalty for a cut of their blood money? They threatened my family." "Don't lie to me, Vincent." Damien pulled a gun from his jacket, sleek, black, utterly final. "I've got bank records, wire transfers, encrypted messages. You've been planning this for months. Your family was never in danger. You're just a greedy coward who thought he could play both sides and walk away rich." Romano's hands shook. "Please. We've known each other since we were kids. That has to count for something." "It did," Damien said quietly. "Right up until you decided your friendship was worth less than cartel money." He raised the gun. Romano dropped to his knees. "Damien, please." The gunshot was deafening. Romano's head snapped back. Blood and brain matter sprayed across the concrete. His body crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, hitting the ground in a lifeless heap that would never move again. Lucia's stomach lurched. She thought she was ready. Thought she understood what violence looked like. But watching it happen, watching Damien execute a man who'd been begging for his life seconds earlier, felt like staring into an abyss that stared back. Damien lowered the gun and turned to his men. "Secure the rest. I want every cartel operative in this building in custody or dead within 5 minutes. No survivors, no exceptions." His men moved like machines. Efficient, brutal, final. Gunfire cracked through the warehouse. Men screamed, bodies hit the floor one after another, adding to the growing pile of casualties that would be discovered by dock workers in the morning and explained away as gang violence that had nothing to do with anyone important. Lucia stood frozen, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. This was the reality. This was Damien's world, not the polished businessmen who poured expensive wine and negotiated import deals. The predator beneath the suit, the man who killed without hesitation and rebuilt his empire on the bones of anyone who crossed him, and she'd chosen to stand beside him. Damien walked back to her, gun still in his hand, Romano's blood spattered across his shirt. His dark eyes searched her face, looking for something, fear, disgust, judgment. "Now you know," he said quietly. Lucia forced herself to breathe, to think, to process the horror churning through her nervous system. She could run, could tear off the earpiece and the vest and walk away from this warehouse, this man, this violence that would stain her soul forever. But Vincent Romano had tried to have Damien killed. The cartel would have murdered her without blinking. And in this world, this brutal, unforgiving world, mercy was a luxury reserved for people who could afford to be victims. Lucia wasn't a victim anymore. "I know," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "And I'm still here." Something shifted in Damien's expression. Not quite relief, not quite approval. Something deeper, something that felt like recognition, like he was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. "Then let's finish this," he said. And together they walked back through the carnage toward the waiting vehicles, leaving behind the bodies and the blood and the last fragments of the life Lucia Moretti had lived before she'd whispered 7 words that changed everything. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. But by the time the police arrived, Damien's convoy had vanished into the night, carrying Lucia deeper into a world where violence was currency and survival meant becoming the thing you'd once feared. She'd crossed the point of no return, and there was no going back, not now, not ever. The blood washed off easier than Lucia expected. She stood in the shower at Damien's penthouse while water ran red down the drain, scrubbing her hands until the skin turned raw. The blood wasn't hers, wasn't even on her directly, just spatter from standing too close to Romano's execution, droplets that had found their way onto her jacket and the side of her neck. But it felt like it covered everything, her skin, her lungs, her soul. When she finally stepped out, the bathroom mirror showed someone she barely recognized. Same face, same dark eyes. But something fundamental had shifted behind them. Something that couldn't be scrubbed away no matter how hard she tried. She'd watched a man die. Watched Damien pull the trigger without hesitation. And she'd chosen to stay. Lucia dressed in clothes someone had left folded on the bed. Expensive things that fit perfectly despite her never providing measurements. Black slacks, silk blouse. Like Damien was already transforming her into someone who belonged in his world instead of serving it drinks. She found him in the living room, standing at the windows with a glass of whiskey, staring at Manhattan like he was trying to find answers written in the lights. He'd showered too, changed into fresh clothes, but the exhaustion remained carved into every line of his body, deeper now than it had been before Newark. "Can't sleep?" Damien asked without turning around. "Can you?" "Haven't slept properly in 15 years. Lucia crossed to the windows and stood beside him. Below, the city pulsed with life. Cars streaming down Fifth Avenue, people spilling out of bars and restaurants, everything moving forward like violence and death were just background noise that nobody noticed anymore. "Does it get easier?" she asked quietly. "Killing people?" "Living with it after." Damien took a long drink, ice clinking against glass. "No, it gets necessary. You stop questioning whether it's right and start accepting that it's survival. Their life or yours. Their empire or mine. Eventually the choice becomes automatic, muscle memory. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand what you've signed up for." Damien finally looked at her, his dark eyes searching. "You did good tonight. Didn't freeze. Didn't panic. Most people would have broken. I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters." Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken things. Lucia's hands still trembled slightly. She clenched them into fists, forcing the shaking to stop through sheer willpower. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait. The cartel's going to retaliate. They lost 6 men in Newark plus their inside connection. They'll hit back hard and fast, probably within 48 hours. My people are already securing our warehouses and shipments, but there's too many targets. They'll find something we missed. And when they do, Damien's expression hardened. We hit them harder. Keep escalating until one side breaks completely. That's how wars work. No negotiation, no compromise, just violence until someone can't take anymore. The cold certainty in his voice sent a chill down Lucia's spine. She'd stepped into a war that wouldn't end until bodies piled high enough to bury the losing side. Get some rest, Damien said. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He walked toward his bedroom, leaving Lucia alone with the city lights, and the ghost of Vincent Romano's final expression burned into her memory. She didn't sleep that night either. Waltz. The retaliation came 36 hours later. Lucia was in Damien's office reviewing import manifests, legitimate business that still needed handling despite the war, when Marco burst through the door with his phone pressed to his ear and murder written across his face. "Boss," Marco said, his voice tight. "We've got a problem." Damien looked up from the contract he'd been reviewing. "Talk. Warehouse in Red Hook, the one we use for European shipments. Someone hit it 20 minutes ago, burned it to the ground. 3 of our people dead, cargo worth $2 million destroyed." Damien's jaw clenched. "Cartel?" "Has to be. Security footage shows 4 men in tactical gear. In and out in under 10 minutes. Professional." Lucia's stomach dropped. Red Hook. The warehouse where Sophia had trained her, where she'd learned to shoot and fight and survive. "Sophia," Lucia said, her voice cracking. "Was she—" "She wasn't on site," Marco said. "Lucky break." The relief was so intense Lucia had to sit down. Damien stood and crossed to the wall of monitors, pulling up security feeds from across the city. His other warehouses. His distribution centers. His legitimate businesses that served as fronts for operations the IRS couldn't track. "Double security on everything," Damien ordered. "I want eyes on every property 24/7. Anyone approaches without authorization, I want to know immediately." "Already done," Marco said. "And get me a location on the cartel's local distribution hub. They want to burn my operations, I'll burn theirs." Marco hesitated. "Boss, we've been trying to track that for months. They move locations constantly. Never stay in one place long enough." "Then try harder," Damien snapped. "I don't care if you have to bribe half the NYPD. Find them." Marco left without another word. Lucia stood, her mind racing. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" "Yes." "How long does it go on?" "Until they're destroyed or we are." Damien turned to face her, his expression grim. "War's not like the movies, Lucia. It's not one big battle with a clear winner. It's attrition, grinding each other down piece by piece until someone breaks. Could take weeks, could take months. Depends on who's willing to sacrifice more. And you're willing to sacrifice everything. I'm willing to sacrifice whatever it takes to win." The absoluteness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, Lucia felt something cold and determined settle into her chest. She'd chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen survival over safety. And if that meant war, then she'd learn how to fight one. "Put me to work," Lucia said. Damien raised an eyebrow. "What?" "You said I have good instincts, that I can read people. So use me. I'm not going to sit in this penthouse drinking expensive wine while your people die for a war I helped start. You didn't start this. I saved your life. That makes me part of it. So give me something to do besides watch from the sidelines." Damien studied her for a long moment, something complicated flickering across his expression. Then he walked to his desk and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "We've got a meeting tomorrow," he said. "Legitimate import deal with a Belgian distributor. High-end wine and spirits. They're bringing their negotiation team to finalize the contract. Normally I'd handle it myself, but I need to focus on the cartel situation." "You want me to negotiate?" "I want you to sit in. Observe. The lead negotiator is a woman named Margot Devereaux. She's sharp, ruthless, and speaks 4 languages fluently. She'll try to steamroll whoever I send. But if you can hold your ground, prove you understand the business, she'll respect that. Maybe even give us better terms." Lucia's pulse quickened. "And if I screw it up?" Then we lose a $2 million contract, and I'll know you're not ready for the next level. Damien held out the folder. Read everything in here tonight, memorize the numbers, understand what we're buying and why. Tomorrow, you're not a waitress anymore. You're Director of International Relations for Castellano Imports. Lucia took the folder, her hand steady despite the fear coiling through her stomach. Director of International Relations. 24 hours ago, she'd been scrubbing Romano's blood off her skin. Now Damien was handing her a position that legitimized her presence in his world while giving her real power. I won't screw it up, she said. Damien almost smiled. I know. Bug. The meeting took place in a conference room at the Four Seasons, neutral territory where both sides could negotiate without the shadow of Damien's reputation hanging over everything. Lucia arrived early, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than 3 months of her old salary. Sophia had helped her with final preparations that morning, not combat training this time, but professional armor. How to sit, how to make eye contact, how to project confidence even when your stomach was eating itself alive. Negotiation's just another kind of fighting, Sophia had said. Different weapons, same principle. Make them think you've got the upper hand even when you're bluffing. Now Lucia sat across from Margot Devereaux and her team, 3 men in expensive suits who looked like they spent more on watches than most people earned in a year. Margot was exactly as Damien had described. Mid-50s, elegant, with steel gray hair and eyes that could dissect you down to the bone marrow. Ms. Moretti, Margot said in lightly accented English. I was expecting Mr. Castellano. He's handling a security matter, Lucia replied smoothly. I'm authorized to negotiate on his behalf. Are you? It wasn't a question. Margot's gaze swept over Lucia with the clinical precision of a surgeon deciding where to cut. And what exactly qualifies you to negotiate a $2 million import contract? Lucia met her stare without flinching. I speak 4 languages fluently, including French and Flemish. I've reviewed your company's export history for the past 3 years and identified 6 discrepancies in your proposed pricing structure that suggest you're trying to inflate costs by 15%. And I understand that you've been struggling to break into the American market because your previous distributors couldn't handle the volume you require. We can. So the question isn't whether I'm qualified. It's whether you're serious about doing business or just wasting my time. All right. Silence crashed across the conference table. Margot's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Calculation, reassessment. Then she smiled. French, Margot said, switching languages mid-sentence. Let's discuss those discrepancies you mentioned. For the next 2 hours, Lucia negotiated in 3 different languages, switching between French, English, and Italian, depending on which of Margot's team members she was addressing. She caught inflated shipping costs, identified hidden fees, pushed back on delivery timelines that would have left Castellano Imports vulnerable to supply chain disruptions. And slowly, grudgingly, Margot gave ground. By the time they broke for lunch, Lucia had secured better terms than Damien's original proposal. Lower costs, faster delivery, and an exclusivity clause that prevented Margot from working with any of Castellano's competitors for the next 3 years. Margot signed the contract with a pen that probably cost more than Lucia's first car. You're impressive, Miss Moretti, Margot said as they stood to leave. When Damien mentioned he had a new director, I expected a pretty face he was grooming for decoration. Instead, I got someone who actually understands business. I look forward to working with you. She extended her hand. Lucia shook it, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her shoulders like a crown she hadn't asked for but had somehow earned anyway. Likewise, Lucia said. When Margot and her team left, Lucia stood alone in the empty conference room, staring at the signed contract on the mahogany table. She'd done it, proven herself, stepped fully into the role Damien had offered, and for the first time since that night at Vittorio, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this world after all. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Marco, "Get back to the office, now, emergency." Lucia's blood turned to ice. She grabbed the contract and ran. By the time Lucia reached Damien's office, the room was packed with people she'd never seen before. Men in tactical gear, women in business suits, everyone moving with the controlled urgency of a situation spiraling toward catastrophe. Damien stood at the center of it all, phone pressed to his ear, his expression darker than Lucia had ever seen. Marco intercepted her at the door. "We've got a leak." Lucia's stomach dropped. "What?" "Someone inside the organization is feeding information to the cartel." Again, the Red Hook warehouse wasn't random. They knew exactly where it was, what we stored there, and when security would be lightest. Same pattern as Romano, but this time the leak is coming from higher up. How high? Marco's jaw tightened. "We don't know yet, but whoever it is has access to Damien's schedule, his security protocols, his financial records, everything." The implications crashed over Lucia like a tidal wave. If the cartel had someone inside Damien's inner circle, then nowhere was safe. No plan was secure. Every move they made would be compromised before it even started. "Does Damien know who it is?" Lucia asked. "He's working on it, but until we find them, we're flying blind." Damien ended his call and crossed to where Lucia and Marco stood. His eyes were bloodshot. Exhaustion and rage carved into every line of his face. "Lucia," Damien said, "I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to go through every communication from the past 3 months. Emails, texts, recorded calls, look for patterns, inconsistencies. Anything that might tell us who's talking to the cartel." Lucia blinked. "Why me?" "Because you're an outsider. You weren't part of this organization when Romano was running his operation. You don't have loyalties clouding your judgment, and you're smart enough to spot things my people might miss because they're too close to it." "Damien, I'm not an investigator, Deki." "You read people better than anyone I've ever met," Damien interrupted. "You spotted the assassination attempt at Vittorio by listening to a conversation nobody else understood. You negotiated a better deal than I could have this morning because you saw through Margot's bullshit. So trust your instincts and help me find the rat before they get more of my people killed." The weight of his trust pressed down on Lucia like physical force. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she wasn't qualified, wasn't ready, wasn't capable of the kind of forensic analysis he was asking for. But Damien was looking at her like she was the only thing standing between him and total collapse. "Okay," Lucia said. "Show me what you've got." She worked through the night. Damien had an entire secure server filled with communications. Thousands of emails, hundreds of hours of recorded calls, text message chains that stretched back months. Lucia sat at a computer in Damien's private office, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago, searching for the invisible thread that connected Romano's betrayal to whoever was selling them out now. Around 3 in the morning, she found something. A series of emails between Damien and his logistics coordinator discussing shipment routes. Nothing unusual on the surface. But the timestamps were wrong. Each email had been sent, then forwarded to an external address exactly 7 minutes later. The forwards had been deleted from the sent folder, but the server logs didn't lie. Lucia's pulse quickened. She pulled up the logistics coordinator's file. Thomas Chen, 42, Harvard MBA. He'd been with Castellano Imports for 8 years. Clean record, no obvious red flags, but the forwards kept appearing. Every major decision, every security update, every piece of sensitive information forwarded to the same external address 7 minutes after the original email. Lucia traced the external address through 3 proxy servers before hitting a wall. Encrypted. Untraceable without resources she didn't have. But she didn't need to trace it. She already knew what it meant. Thomas Chen was the leak. Lucia's hand shook as she compiled the evidence into a report. Screenshots, log files, timestamps that painted a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. When she finished, dawn was breaking across the Hudson River, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked too much like blood. She found Damien in the living room, staring at the same view, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table beside him. "I found him," Lucia said. Damien turned, his eyes hollow. "Who?" "Thomas Chen, your logistics coordinator. He's been forwarding your emails to an external address for the past 4 months. Every major decision, every security protocol, everything." Damien's expression went completely still. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "Bring Thomas to the office," he said quietly. "Now. I don't care where he is or what he's doing. Bring him now." He ended the call and looked at Lucia. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." Damien nodded slowly. "Then we end this today." Thomas Chen arrived 90 minutes later, flanked by two guards who looked ready to shoot him if he so much as breathed wrong. He was exactly what Lucia had pictured from his file. Middle-aged, soft around the edges, wearing wire-rimmed glasses, and an expression of complete confusion. "Damien," Thomas said as the guard shoved him into a chair. "What's going on? Your guys dragged me out of my house at 6 in the morning. "Shut up," Damien said. The coldness in his voice made Thomas's face go pale. Damien pulled out a tablet and set it on the table in front of Thomas. The screen showed Lucia's report, every forwarded email, every timestamp, every piece of evidence that proved Thomas had been selling them out for months. "Explain this," Damien said. Thomas's eyes scanned the screen. His face went from pale to ash white. This isn't," Thomas stammered. "Don't lie to me." Damien's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I've got server logs, timestamps, your fingerprints all over communications you forwarded to the cartel, so don't sit there and pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." Thomas's hands trembled. "They threatened my daughter, said they'd kill her if I didn't cooperate. I didn't have a choice." "You had a choice," Damien interrupted. "You could have come to me, told me what was happening, asked for protection. Instead, you sold out 8 years of loyalty for a threat you never even verified." "I was trying to protect my family, Worthy." "Your family?" Damien's laugh was bitter. "You got 3 of my people killed in Red Hook. You compromised millions of dollars in shipments. You put Lucia's life at risk because the cartel knows where she is, what she looks like, and exactly how to find her, all because you decided your daughter's safety was worth more than everyone else's." Thomas was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They said—" "I don't care what they said." Damien pulled out his gun. Thomas's eyes went wide with terror. "Damien, please, I'll fix it. I'll do anything." "You're right," Damien said. "You will." He turned to Marco. "Get me the cartel's contact information, the one Thomas has been communicating with. I want a meeting set up for tonight." Marco blinked. "Boss, Do it," Damien ordered. "Tell them I want to negotiate. End the war. Discuss terms. Whatever bullshit they need to hear to get them in a room." Understanding dawned on Marco's face. "You're setting a trap." "I'm ending this." Damien looked at Thomas. "And you're going to help me. You're going to send the message. Set up the meeting. Get them to come out of hiding. And maybe, I'll let you live long enough to see your daughter again." Thomas nodded frantically. Yes, anything. Just please don't hurt her." "Your daughter's fine," Damien said. "I had my people check on her this morning. She's at school, safe. The cartel never touched her. They just needed you scared enough to believe they would." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. He'd betrayed everything for a threat that never existed. Sold out his employer, his colleagues, his integrity, for nothing. Damien handed Thomas a phone. "Make the call. Now. And if you try to warn them, I'll put a bullet in your head before you finish the sentence." Thomas's hands shook so badly he could barely hold the phone, but he made the call. "Ichikats." The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned shipping facility near the Brooklyn waterfront. Neutral ground, far enough from populated areas that gunfire wouldn't draw immediate attention. Damien spent the day preparing. Lucia watched him transform from exhausted crime lord to tactical commander, coordinating his people with the precision of a general planning an invasion. Positions were assigned, weapons distributed, contingency plans established for every possible scenario. "You're not coming," Damien told Lucia around sunset. "The hell I'm not. This is different from Newark. This is a kill box. We're walking into a meeting with the intent to execute everyone in the room. It's going to be loud, messy, and dangerous. I need you safe." "And I need to see this through," Lucia shot back. "They tried to kill you at Vittorio. They burned your warehouse. They've been hunting me for weeks. So don't tell me I'm sitting this one out while you finish the war I helped start." Damien's jaw tightened. "Lucia, I'm going," she said firmly. "You trusted me to find the leak. You trusted me to negotiate with Margot. So trust me to handle this." They stared at each other, locked in a silent battle of wills that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the fact that Lucia refused to be protected like fragile glass when she'd already proven she could survive being broken. Finally, Damien exhaled. "Fine. But you stay in the vehicle with Marco. You don't move unless I give the signal. Understood? Understood. And Lucia? Damien's expression softened. If this goes wrong, if something happens to me, you run. You take the money I've set aside for you and you disappear. Promise me. Lucia's throat tightened. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway. She wanted to argue, wanted to say they'd both survive because the alternative was unthinkable. But the fear in his eyes told her he'd been preparing for this moment since the day he pulled her behind that table at Vittorio. I promise, she whispered. Damien nodded. Then he did something that surprised her. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight enough that she could feel his heartbeat hammering against her chest. Thank you, he said quietly, for not walking away when you had the chance. Lucia closed her eyes, breathing in his scent. Cologne and gunpowder and something uniquely him that had become as familiar as her own skin. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay, she whispered back. Then they pulled apart and Damien became the crime lord again. Cold, focused, ready for war. Let's finish this, he said. The shipping facility loomed against the night sky like a monument to industrial decay. Rusted cranes, broken windows, shipping containers stacked 3 high, creating a maze of metal corridors that swallowed sound and light. Damien's convoy arrived 15 minutes early. His men spread across the facility in coordinated silence, taking positions on rooftops, behind containers, inside buildings that offered clear sightlines to the main warehouse where the meeting would take place. Lucia sat in the SUV with Marco, watching through night vision binoculars as Damien and 3 of his guards entered the warehouse. Inside, Thomas Chen stood in the center of the empty space, looking like a man standing on the gallows. The cartel representatives would arrive any minute. When they did, Damien would execute them all. Clean sweep, no survivors, war over. Lucia's pulse thundered in her ears. Everything had led to this moment. Vittorio, Romano's execution, the warehouse fire, Thomas's betrayal. Every piece of violence and chaos converging into one final confrontation that would determine whether Damien's empire survived or crumbled into ash. Marco's radio crackled. Movement. 2 vehicles approaching from the south. Lucia watched through the binoculars as black SUVs rolled into the facility and stopped near the warehouse entrance. 6 men climbed out, tactical gear, automatic weapons, moving with the practiced efficiency of professional killers. The cartel had arrived. Damien stood motionless in the center of the warehouse, waiting. The cartel soldiers entered. Their leader was a man in his 50s, scarred and cold-eyed, carrying authority like a weapon. He stopped 10 feet from Damien, studying him with the detached interest of a scientist examining an insect. Castellano, the man said in Spanish-accented English, you wanted to negotiate. I wanted to end this, Damien replied. Your operations cost me millions, killed my people, threatened my business. I'm tired of it. Then surrender your territory, walk away, we'll let you live. Or, Damien said quietly, I could kill you all and take your territory instead. The cartel leader smiled. You think you've got the upper hand because you found our inside man? You think you've set some clever trap? Something in his tone made Lucia's blood run cold. Actually, the cartel leader continued, we were counting on it. Then everything exploded. Not the warehouse, the vehicles outside. Lucia watched in horror as Damien's SUVs detonated in synchronized fireballs that turned night into blazing day. The shockwave rocked her vehicle hard enough to crack the windshield. Marco shouted something she couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. Gunfire erupted from every direction, not from Damien's men, from the shipping containers, from the rooftops, from positions Damien's team should have secured but hadn't because someone had fed the cartel their entire tactical plan. Lucia's stomach dropped into freefall. They'd been betrayed. Again. Thomas hadn't been the only leak. Someone else, someone higher up, someone Damien trusted completely, had sold them out. And now Damien was trapped inside a kill box surrounded by cartel soldiers while his security team died in explosions and crossfire they'd never seen coming. Marco threw the SUV into reverse, tires screaming against concrete. We need to get out of here, he shouted. Now! But Lucia was already moving. She grabbed the Glock from her holster and kicked open the door. What the hell are you doing? Marco yelled. Lucia didn't answer. She ran toward the warehouse while bullets tore through the air around her and the facility burned like the end of the world, driven by one thought that overrode every survival instinct screaming at her to run the other way. Damien was in there, and she wasn't leaving him behind. Not now, not ever. Even if it meant dying beside him in the fire and blood and chaos of a war that had just become something far worse than either of them had imagined. Because somewhere in the smoke and violence, someone Damien trusted had decided his empire was worth more than his life. And Lucia was about to find out exactly how far she was willing to go to save the man who'd given her a reason to stop being invisible. Lucia's lungs burned as she sprinted toward the warehouse through a battlefield that had erupted from nothing. Bullets whined past her head like angry hornets. Explosions lit the night in stuttering orange flashes that painted shadows across rusted metal and concrete. The air tasted like gunpowder and burning rubber. Behind her, Marco was screaming her name. She didn't stop, couldn't stop. Damien was inside that warehouse surrounded by cartel soldiers who turned his own trap into an execution chamber. Every instinct she possessed told her to run the other direction. Survival meant retreat. Safety meant distance. But Damien had stood beside her when the world wanted her dead. And Lucia Moretti didn't abandon people who'd given her a reason to keep breathing. She hit the warehouse entrance at a dead run, shoulder slamming against the metal door hard enough to bruise bone. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and chaos. Muzzle flashes strobed through the darkness. Men were shouting in Spanish and English and dying in both languages. Lucia dropped behind a concrete pillar as bullets chewed through the space where she'd been standing half a second earlier. Her heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Sweat poured down her back. Her hands shook as she gripped the Glock Sophia had taught her to use in scenarios exactly like this one. Breathe, focus, survive. She peered around the pillar. The warehouse had transformed into a slaughterhouse. Damien's guards were pinned down behind overturned tables and metal crates, returning fire against cartel soldiers who had superior positions and superior numbers. Bodies already littered the floor. Blood pooled on concrete. Spent brass casings rolled across the ground like deadly confetti. And in the center of it all, Damien fought like a man possessed. He'd taken cover behind a steel support beam, gun in one hand, phone pressed to his ear with the other. Coordinating. Commanding. Refusing to surrender even as his empire crumbled around him in real time. The cartel leader, the scarred man who'd walked in pretending to negotiate, stood near the far entrance with 3 bodyguards, watching the carnage with the detached satisfaction of someone who'd planned every move 3 steps ahead. "Your organization's finished, Castellano," the cartel leader shouted over the gunfire. "We've got people inside your operation you don't even know about. Your warehouses, your accounts, your security team. We've been bleeding you dry for months and you were too arrogant to see it." Damien fired twice. Both shots went wide. He ducked back behind the beam as return fire turned the steel into a ringing bell of death. "So here's how this ends," the cartel leader continued. "You die tonight. We take your territory. And everyone who worked for you either joins us or joins you in the ground. Your choice used to matter. Now it doesn't." Lucia's blood turned to ice. They weren't just here to kill Damien. They were here to dismantle everything he'd built, absorb his empire, turn his people into assets or corpses. And they had the numbers to do it. She counted quickly. 8 cartel soldiers still standing. Maybe 3 of Damien's guards left alive. The math was brutal and simple. They were going to lose, unless someone changed the equation. Lucia's mind raced through possibilities. She had a gun with 15 rounds. Basic training from Sophia that covered shooting ranges and controlled scenarios, but nothing like this urban warfare nightmare. 0 backup beyond Marco, who was probably still outside trying to coordinate an extraction that would never arrive in time. The smart play was retreat. Find cover. Wait for the cartel to finish Damien and pray they didn't hunt her down afterward. But Lucia was done making smart plays. She'd stepped into Damien's world by choosing courage over silence at Vittorio. And she'd finish what she started the same way. Lucia took 3 deep breaths, steadying her hands the way Sophia had taught her. Then she stepped out from behind the pillar and started shooting. Her first shot caught a cartel soldier in the shoulder. He spun, screaming, clutching the wound. Her second shot hit him in the chest and dropped him. The warehouse erupted into renewed chaos. Every gun swiveled toward Lucia's position. She dove behind a metal crate as bullets shredded the air where she'd been standing. concrete exploding into dust and shrapnel that stung her face like tiny knives. But she'd bought Damien 5 seconds. 5 seconds where the cartel's attention shifted. 5 seconds where he could move. And Damien didn't waste them. He broke from cover, moving with the brutal efficiency of a man who'd spent decades surviving situations that should have killed him. He fired as he ran, each shot precise and lethal. 2 cartel soldiers went down before they could reacquire their targets. A third took a bullet to the throat and collapsed gurgling. Damien slid behind the crate beside Lucia, breathing hard, blood streaming from a cut above his left eye. "You're insane," he gasped. "Probably," Lucia said, ejecting her magazine and slamming in a fresh one with shaking hands. "But I'm not letting you die in here." Something flickered across Damien's expression. Not quite gratitude, not quite disbelief. Something deeper that didn't have words attached. "The cartel leader," Damien said, his voice tight. "He's the priority. We take him down, the rest might scatter." Might? It's the best shot we've got. Gunfire hammered their position. Metal screamed. Concrete dust filled Lucia's lungs. One of Damien's remaining guards shouted something desperate and defiant before a burst of automatic fire cut him off mid-sentence. They were losing, dying, running out of time and ammunition and miracles. Lucia looked at Damien, at the man who'd given her power when the world had made her invisible, who'd trusted her with his life and his empire, who was about to die in a warehouse surrounded by enemies because someone he trusted had sold him out. "Together?" she asked. Damien's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile in another life. "Together." They moved as one. Damien broke left, drawing fire while Lucia sprinted right, using the smoke and chaos as cover. Bullets chased her across the warehouse floor. She felt one pass so close to her head that her hair moved in the wake. Another clipped her jacket, tearing fabric but missing flesh. She didn't stop running. The cartel leader saw her coming too late. His bodyguards raised their weapons, but Lucia was already firing, muscle memory and Sophia's training overriding conscious thought. She hit the first bodyguard center mass. The second took 2 shots to the chest before crumpling. The third got his rifle up. Lucia's gun clicked empty. Time slowed to syrup. She watched the bodyguard's finger tighten on the trigger. Saw the muzzle flash that meant she was about to die. Felt the strange calm that came with knowing there was nothing left to do except face the end with her eyes open. Then Damien appeared behind the bodyguard like an avenging ghost and drove a knife into the base of his skull. The bodyguard collapsed. The cartel leader stood alone, his eyes wide with something that might have been fear, or might have been respect, or might have been the realization that he'd underestimated the wrong people. Damien leveled his gun at the man's head. "Who's the leak?" Damien demanded, his voice raw. "Who else is feeding you information?" The cartel leader smiled through blood-stained teeth. "You really want to know? I want a name. Marco." The word detonated like a grenade. Lucia's stomach dropped into freefall. Behind them, she heard footsteps. Turned to see Marco walking through the warehouse entrance, gun drawn, his expression carved from stone. "Sorry, boss," Marco said quietly, "but they made me an offer I couldn't refuse." The betrayal hit harder than any bullet could have. Marco. Damien's head of security, the man he'd trusted more than anyone, the soldier who'd protected Lucia, driven her to safety, stood guard while she slept. He'd been working for the cartel the entire time. Damien's gun hand trembled. "How long?" "Since the beginning," Marco said. "Romano was just the distraction. Someone obvious enough that when you found him, you'd think the problem was solved. Meanwhile, I kept feeding them everything they needed, your schedule, your security protocols, your safe houses." "The meeting at Vittorio," Lucia breathed. "You knew they were coming." "I set it up," Marco confirmed. "But you got in the way. Saved him when you should have let him die. After that, the cartel wanted you dead almost as much as they wanted him. Made my job a lot harder." Rage flooded through Lucia's veins like molten steel. "So you've been playing both sides, pretending to protect us while leading us into traps." "I've been surviving," Marco corrected. "Same as you. Same as everyone in this business. Damien's empire was already crumbling. The cartel's the future. I just picked the winning side early." "You killed your own people," Damien said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Men who trusted you, fought beside you. Casualties of war." Marco's expression didn't change. Nothing personal, just business. Business. Damien's laugh was broken glass. I gave you everything. Money, power, respect. I trusted you with my life. And I sold it for something better. Marco raised his gun. Now, drop your weapon, or I put a bullet in Lucia's head before you can blink. Damien's jaw clenched so hard Lucia heard his teeth grind. He dropped the gun. It clattered against concrete with the sound of surrender. Marco smiled. Smart choice. Now the cartel's going to take over your operations. Your people will work for us or die. Your money becomes our money, and you both disappear so completely that nobody will even remember you existed. There's a problem with your plan, Lucia said quietly. Marco's eyes flicked toward her. What's that? You forgot about Sophia. Marco's expression shifted, started to form a question. Then the warehouse's back entrance exploded inward, and Sophia came through it like the wrath of something ancient and merciless, flanked by 6 tactical operators in full combat gear. The cartel soldiers barely had time to register the new threat before Sophia's team opened fire with surgical precision. Headshots, center mass, no hesitation, no mercy. Professional killers executing a textbook assault against targets who'd never stood a chance. Marco spun toward the new threat, his gun tracking. Lucia lunged. She hit him from the side, her entire body weight slamming into his ribs hard enough to crack bone. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Marco's gun discharged, the bullet punching through the ceiling. Lucia drove her knee into his stomach. Once, twice, 3 times until he gasped for air. Then she grabbed his gun and pressed the barrel against his temple. Don't move, she hissed. Marco went still. Around them, Sophia's team finished securing the warehouse with brutal efficiency. Cartel soldiers dropped one by one. The few who tried to run were cut down before they made it 10 feet. Within 90 seconds, the shooting stopped. The silence was deafening. Damien retrieved his weapon and crossed to where Lucia had Marco pinned. His eyes were black ice. No emotion, no forgiveness, just the cold certainty of judgment. Sophia, Damien said without looking away from Marco. How did you know? Lucia called me 20 minutes ago, Sophia said, lowering her rifle. Said something felt wrong. Asked me to bring backup just in case. Good instincts. Lucia's hands shook as she kept the gun pressed against Marco's skull. She'd called Sophia from the SUV during the drive to the warehouse, a precaution born from paranoia and the gnawing sense that something about the plan felt too clean, too perfect, too much like another trap. She'd been right, and it had saved their lives. Damien crouched beside Marco, studying him with the detached interest of a surgeon examining a tumor. You've got one chance to make this quick. Tell me everything, every contact, every operation, every piece of information you gave the cartel. Or what? Marco spat blood. You'll kill me? I'm already dead. We both know it. I'll kill you slow, Damien corrected. I'll make it last days, weeks if I'm feeling creative. Or you can talk now, and I'll make it fast. Your choice. You've got 10 seconds. Marco's eyes darted between Damien and the gun barrel pressed against his head. Calculation flickered across his expression. Weighing options. Searching for escape routes that didn't exist. 5 seconds, Damien said. All right, Marco gasped. All right. The cartel's main operation runs through a distribution hub in Jersey City, warehouse on the waterfront. They're moving product tomorrow night. Biggest shipment of the year. Cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, everything. They're planning to flood the East Coast market while your organization's in chaos. Who else is working for them? 3 of your captains, 2 accountants, security personnel at 4 different warehouses. I can give you names, locations, everything. Damien stood. Do it. You've got 60 seconds. Marco talked. He gave up names like he was reading a grocery list. People Damien had trusted for years, colleagues who'd eaten at his table, soldiers who'd sworn loyalty. All of them bought and paid for by cartel money while Damien's empire rotted from the inside. When Marco finished, Damien looked at Sophia. Verify everything he said. I want confirmation before sunrise. Sophia nodded and pulled out her phone. Damien turned back to Marco. You're done. Wait, you said you'd make it quick. I lied. Damien pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Marco's body jerked once and went still, blood pooling beneath his head in a spreading dark stain that looked black in the dim light. Lucia released the breath she'd been holding. Her entire body trembled. Adrenaline crash, hit like a freight train, making her legs unsteady and her vision blur at the edges. She just helped kill a man, held him down while Damien executed him for betrayal. She should have felt horror, guilt, something. Instead, she felt nothing except exhausted relief that they were still alive. Damien took the gun gently from her shaking hands. "You okay?" Lucia nodded, not trusting her voice. "You saved my life," Damien said quietly. "Again. If you hadn't called Sophia—" "I had a bad feeling," Lucia interrupted. "That's all. Just instinct." "Your instincts are better than most people's certainty." Damien's expression softened. "Thank you for not running when you had the chance." "We're past that now," Lucia said. "You and me. Whatever this is, we finish it together or we don't finish it at all." Something shifted in Damien's eyes. Recognition. Understanding. The acknowledgement of a bond forged through violence and trust, and the kind of partnership that couldn't exist in normal worlds with normal rules. Sophia approached, her phone pressed to her ear. "Confirmed. The Jersey City warehouse exists. My contacts verify Marco's intel. Shipment scheduled for tomorrow night. 20 million in product." Damien's jaw set. "Then we hit them tomorrow. Take the shipment. Burn the warehouse. Arrest everyone the cartel's got embedded in my organization. End this completely." "Boss," Sophia said carefully, "that's a suicide mission. They'll have heavy security. Probably 50 soldiers guarding 20 million in drugs. We'd need an army." "Then we get an army." Damien pulled out his phone. "I'm calling in every favor I've got, every alliance, every connection. We're going to hit that warehouse with everything we've got, and we're going to destroy the cartel's entire East Coast operation in one night." "And if we lose?" Sophia asked. "We don't lose," Damien said flatly, "because losing means they win. They take our territory, our business, our lives. So we hit them with everything. No holding back, no mercy. Just total war until one side can't fight anymore." He looked at Lucia. "You in?" Lucia thought about the waitress she'd been 3 weeks ago. Invisible, powerless, moving through a world that never noticed her except to demand refills and better service. That woman was gone, burned away in gunfire and betrayal and blood. The woman standing in the warehouse now was something different, something harder, something that had learned to survive by becoming dangerous instead of invisible. "I'm in," Lucia said. Damien nodded. Then he turned to Sophia and his remaining guards. "Get everyone to the safe house. I want a full tactical briefing in 2 hours. Weapons, vehicles, manpower. We plan this down to the second. Tomorrow night, we end the cartel's operation permanently." Sophia and the guards moved to execute orders with the mechanical precision of soldiers who'd stopped questioning and started surviving. Damien and Lucia walked out of the warehouse together, stepping over bodies and spent brass casings, leaving behind the carnage of Marco's betrayal and the cartel's failed trap. Outside, the facility was still burning. Flames climbed toward the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Soon the police would arrive. Questions would be asked. Evidence would be collected. But Damien's people would handle it. They always did. Damien led Lucia to one of the surviving vehicles. A black SUV with tinted windows and armor plating that had absorbed enough bullets to look like a sculpture made of scars. They climbed inside, sat in silence while the driver navigated through back streets and industrial zones where cameras couldn't track them. Finally, Lucia spoke. "How many of your people are working for the cartel?" "Based on Marco's information? Maybe 15, maybe more. I won't know until Sophia finishes verification. So we can't trust anyone. We can trust Sophia. She's been with me since the beginning. Saved my life more times than I can count. She's solid." "And everyone else?" Damien's expression was grim. "Everyone else is suspect until proven otherwise." Lucia leaned back against the seat, exhaustion crashing over her in waves that made her bones feel like lead. "This is what your life looks like. Constantly watching your back, never knowing who's loyal and who's waiting to sell you out." "Yes. How do you stand it?" "I don't know anymore," Damien admitted. "I used to think power was worth the paranoia. Control was worth the isolation. But lately—" He stopped. Started again. "Lately I've been wondering if I've spent so long building an empire that I forgot to build a life worth living." The vulnerability in his voice caught Lucia off guard. This was the man beneath the armor, the human underneath the crime lord, someone who'd climbed to the top of a violent world and discovered the view from the summit was just other people trying to pull him down. "What would you do?" Lucia asked quietly. "If you could walk away from all of this, start over, be someone else." Damien was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the city sliding past in blurred lights and shadows. "I'd build something legitimate," he said finally, "something that helps people instead of bleeding them. Import business, maybe philanthropy. Use the connections I've got for something other than moving product and dodging federal indictments." He looked at her. "What about you?" Lucia thought about it. "I'd keep doing what I'm doing now, negotiating, building relationships, turning hostile situations into partnerships. Turns out I'm good at it." "You're better than good. You're exceptional. I learned from watching you." "You learned from being yourself," Damien corrected. "I just gave you the space to stop hiding it." The word settled into Lucia's chest like stones dropping into still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she understood about herself. Maybe she hadn't changed. Maybe she'd just finally become visible. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a building Lucia didn't recognize. The driver killed the engine. Damien's phone buzzed with incoming messages, reports from his people, updates on the tactical situation, confirmation that the safe house was secure. "We've got a lot of work to do before tomorrow night," Damien said. "Planning, preparation, making sure we don't walk into another trap." "Then let's get started," Lucia said. They climbed out of the vehicle and walked toward the elevator that would take them to the safe house, where Sophia and the remaining loyal soldiers waited to plan the final assault. Tomorrow night, they would hit the cartel's distribution hub with everything they had. Tomorrow night, the war would reach its breaking point. Tomorrow night, Lucia and Damien would face the culmination of every choice they'd made since that first whispered warning at Vittorio, the moment when she'd decided to save a stranger's life and discovered that survival meant becoming something fiercer than fear. And as they stepped into the elevator together, Lucia felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite love, not quite partnership. Something that existed in the space between, where two people who'd saved each other's lives stood side by side against a world that wanted them dead, bound together by violence and trust, and the knowledge that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The elevator doors closed, and somewhere across the river in Jersey City, $20 million in cartel drugs sat waiting in a warehouse that would become the final battlefield. One last fight, one last stand, everything on the line, no second chances. Just Lucia and Damien against an empire built on blood and money and the kind of power that crushed anyone who challenged it. But they'd come this far, survived this much, and neither of them had any intention of stopping now, not when they were so close to the end, not when victory or death waited just across the water, not when everything they'd fought for hung in the balance of one final brutal confrontation that would determine whether they built something new from the ashes, or burned with everything they'd tried to protect. The tactical briefing lasted 4 hours. Sophia spread blueprints across the table in the safe house while Damien's remaining loyal soldiers gathered around, studying the Jersey City warehouse like generals planning an invasion. Lucia stood beside Damien, memorizing exit routes and choke points and kill zones, her exhaustion buried beneath layers of focus that felt like armor against the reality of what they were about to do. "The cartel's expecting heavy security," Sophia said, tapping the blueprint with a gloved finger. "Marco's intel suggests 50 soldiers minimum, automatic weapons, body armor. They're protecting 20 million in product. They won't go down easy." "Neither will we," Damien said quietly. "What's our manpower?" 23 confirmed loyal, another 6 possibles who haven't been vetted completely. We bring the possibles, we risk another leak. We don't bring them, we're outnumbered 2-1. Damien's jaw tightened. "Leave the possibles behind. I'd rather fight outnumbered than deal with another Marco." Sophia nodded. "Then we go with what we've got. Hit them from 3 sides simultaneously. Alpha Team takes the north entrance. Bravo takes the south. Charlie Team provides sniper support from the adjacent building. Fast, brutal, overwhelming force before they can coordinate a defense." "What about federal involvement?" one of the soldiers asked. "We're talking about seizing 20 million in drugs. That's a major bust. If we tip off the DEA, no feds, Damien interrupted. We bring in law enforcement, they'll want arrests, trials, evidence chains. I want the cartel's operation destroyed tonight, completely. No survivors to rebuild. No lawyers negotiating plea deals, just total annihilation. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Damien was saying. This wasn't a police operation. It was an execution. Questions? Damien asked. Nobody spoke. Good. We move at 2300 hours. That gives us 12 hours to prep weapons, vehicles, and contingencies. Sophia's in tactical command. You follow her orders like they're coming from me. Anyone hesitates, anyone questions, anyone thinks about running, I'll put a bullet in them myself. Clear? A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the room. The soldiers dispersed, moving toward the armory to select weapons and gear. Sophia pulled Damien aside, her expression tight with concern. Boss, this is a suicide mission, she said quietly. Even with perfect execution, we're going to take casualties, heavy casualties. You need to prepare for the possibility that some of us don't make it back. I know, Damien said, and you're still going through with it. I don't have a choice. The cartel's dismantled my organization from the inside. They've got my people, my territory, my reputation. If I don't hit back now, if I don't show them there's a cost to coming after me, then I'm finished. My empire collapses, and everyone who stayed loyal dies for nothing. Sophia studied him for a long moment. This isn't just about the empire anymore, is it? Damien's eyes flicked toward Lucia, who stood across the room reviewing tactical maps with a concentration that carved deep lines into her forehead. No, Damien admitted. It's not. You're doing this for her. I'm doing this because she deserves a world where she doesn't have to look over her shoulder every second, where she can build something legitimate without cartel assassins hunting her. She saved my life at Vittorio. She's saved it a dozen times since. This is me returning the favor. By starting a war. By finishing one, Damien corrected. The cartel declared war the moment they sent those assassins to Vittorio. I'm just making sure it ends on my terms. Sophia's expression softened. You love her? Damien didn't answer immediately. He watched Lucia trace exit routes on the blueprint with her finger, absorbed completely in the task like nothing else existed. She'd transformed in 3 weeks from invisible waitress to someone who negotiated million-dollar contracts and stood in warehouses holding guns against traitors' heads without flinching. I respect her, Damien said finally. I trust her. Whether that's love or something else, I don't know. But I know she's the first person in 15 years who's made me think there might be something worth building beyond this empire of violence and paranoia. Then maybe you should tell her, Sophia said. Before tomorrow night, just in case. The unspoken words hung heavy between them. Just in case you don't survive. Damien nodded slowly. Maybe I will. Lucia found him on the rooftop around 3 in the morning. The safe house occupied the top floors of a converted factory building in Brooklyn, and the roof offered a clear view of Manhattan glittering across the East River like a promise the city never quite kept. Damien stood at the edge, hands in his pockets, staring at the skyline like he was memorizing it. Couldn't sleep? Lucia asked, crossing to stand beside him. Haven't slept in days, Damien admitted. Keeps catching up with me at the worst times. Tomorrow's going to be bad, isn't it? Tomorrow's going to be hell. We're outnumbered, outgunned, walking into a fortress filled with professional killers who know we're coming. Best case scenario, we win, but lose half our people doing it. Worst case, he stopped, started again. Worst case, neither of us walks out. Lucia's throat tightened. She'd been trying not to think about that possibility, trying to focus on tactics and strategy and the mechanical precision of planning instead of the very real chance that tomorrow night would be the last night she ever saw. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. You scared? Damien was silent for a moment. Terrified. Not of dying. I've been ready for that since the day I took over this empire. But dying without knowing if I did something that mattered, that scares me. Spending 15 years building power only to have it collapse the moment I'm gone. That's the nightmare. You've done things that matter, Lucia said. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You trusted me with real responsibility. You showed me I could be more than invisible. And I dragged you into a war that might kill you. I dragged myself in the moment I warned you at Vittorio. Don't take that choice away from me by pretending I'm some victim you corrupted. I knew what I was doing, maybe not completely, maybe not all the consequences, but I chose to save you, chose to stay, chose to fight. Those are my decisions, not yours. Damien turned to face her fully, his dark eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. If we survive tomorrow, if we actually pull this off and destroy the cartel's operation, what happens next? With us? The question caught Lucia off guard. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't let herself think about after, about what came next if they actually won. I don't know, she said honestly. We figure it out. Build something legitimate. Use everything we've learned to create an empire that doesn't require constant violence to maintain. You really think that's possible? I think anything's possible if you want it badly enough. Lucia stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into every line of Damien's face, the weight he carried that never seemed to lighten no matter how many wars he won. You told me once there are two kinds of people, prey and predators. But I think there's a third kind, people who survive by becoming something the world's never seen before, something that doesn't fit the old categories. And what are we? We're the ones who refuse to accept the world as it is, who look at impossible situations and decide to rewrite the rules instead of playing by them. You did that when you built your empire. I did that when I warned you at Vittorio. We keep doing it every time we choose survival over surrender. Damien reached up and touched her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I meant what I said before, about you saving my life. You did more than stop an assassination. You reminded me there's something worth protecting beyond power and territory. What's that? The possibility of becoming someone better than who I am. Lucia's breath caught. She'd seen Damien execute traitors without hesitation, watched him command soldiers and negotiate deals and navigate violence with the cold precision of someone born to it. But in this moment, standing on a Brooklyn rooftop while the city whispered below, he looked almost vulnerable, almost human. You're already better than you think, Lucia said softly. You just spend so much time surviving that you forget to notice. Damien pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath his feet. Lucia pressed her face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong despite everything trying to stop it. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other against the cold and the fear, and the very real possibility that tomorrow would destroy them both. Finally, Damien pulled back enough to look at her. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know. Don't, Lucia interrupted. Don't say goodbye. Don't act like we're already dead. We survive together or we don't survive at all. That's the deal. Damien's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. All right, no goodbyes, just promises. What kind of promises? That if we make it through tomorrow, I'm going to dismantle every illegal operation I've got and rebuild this empire into something legitimate, something you can be proud to be part of. And if we don't make it through, then at least we go down fighting for something that matters. Lucia kissed him, not gently, not tentatively, but with the desperate intensity of someone who'd learned that tomorrow was a luxury you couldn't count on. Damien kissed her back just as fiercely, his hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer like he could anchor himself to her and forget, just for a moment, that the world wanted them dead. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the sky was starting to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming, and with it, the final battle. The convoy rolled out at 2200 hours, 6 black SUVs moving through Brooklyn's industrial zones in tight formation, carrying 23 soldiers armed with enough firepower to start a small war. Lucia rode in the lead vehicle with Damien and Sophia, wearing tactical gear that felt too heavy and body armor that pressed against her ribs with every breath. Her hands were steady, her mind clear. Fear had burned away hours ago, replaced by cold focus that felt like standing outside herself and watching someone else prepare to die. Sophia reviewed the tactical plan one final time over the comms. Alpha Team hits the north entrance at 2300 exactly. Bravo Team waits 30 seconds, then breaches the south. Charlie Team provides covering fire from adjacent rooftops. We move fast, hit hard, and don't stop until every cartel operative is down or running. Questions? Silence on the comms. Everyone knew their role. Everyone understood the stakes. The convoy crossed into Jersey City just before 2300, navigating through empty streets toward the waterfront where the cartel's distribution warehouse sat like a fortress waiting to be stormed. Lucia's pulse hammered in her ears. She checked her weapon for the dozenth time. Loaded, safety off, ready to kill anyone who got between her and survival. Sophia had given her explicit orders to stay behind the front line, provide supporting fire, and not engage unless absolutely necessary. Lucia had nodded and agreed and had no intention of following those orders if things went sideways. She'd come too far to hide behind other people's courage. The warehouse loomed ahead. 3 stories of concrete and steel, windows dark, perimeter lit by sodium lamps that turned everything sickly yellow. 2 guards stood outside the main entrance, smoking cigarettes and looking bored. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Damien's voice crackled over the comms. "Alpha team, you're green, move in." The lead SUV accelerated, smashing through the chain-link fence surrounding the warehouse compound. The guards barely had time to drop their cigarettes before Sophia's team cut them down with suppressed weapons that sounded like violent whispers. Alpha team poured out of the vehicles and hit the north entrance like a battering ram made of bodies and bullets. The warehouse interior exploded into chaos. Cartel soldiers appeared from every direction, behind crates, on catwalks, bursting through side doors with weapons raised. Muzzle flashes strobed through darkness, the air filled with the deafening crack of automatic gunfire, and the screams of men dying in languages Lucia understood and some she didn't. Damien's team moved with brutal efficiency, clearing rooms with stacked entry techniques and overlapping fields of fire. But the cartel had numbers. For every soldier Damien's team dropped, 2 more appeared to replace them. Lucia followed close behind the front line, her weapon raised, her eyes scanning for threats. A cartel soldier emerged from behind a shipping crate to her left. She fired twice without thinking. Both shots hit center mass. The soldier crumpled. No hesitation. No guilt. Just survival. Bravo team breached the south entrance exactly on schedule, catching the cartel in a crossfire that turned the warehouse into a killing field. Bodies piled up. Blood slicked the concrete floor. Spent brass casings rolled everywhere like deadly confetti. Then something went wrong. A massive explosion ripped through the warehouse's east wall, blowing out windows and sending chunks of concrete flying like shrapnel. The shockwave knocked Lucia off her feet. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. She tasted copper and dust. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw them. Reinforcements. At least 30 more cartel soldiers pouring through the blown-out wall, heavily armed and moving with military precision. Marco's intel had been wrong, or incomplete, or deliberately misleading even in death. The numbers shifted instantly from difficult to impossible. "Fall back!" Sophia screamed over the comms. "Alpha, Bravo, pull back to secondary positions. Charlie, lay down, suppressing fire." But there was nowhere to fall back to. The cartel had them surrounded, pinned down in the center of the warehouse with enemies closing from every direction. Lucia scrambled behind an overturned table as bullets chewed through metal and wood above her head. Beside her, one of Damien's soldiers took 3 rounds to the chest and went down gurgling. She grabbed his rifle, checked the magazine, started returning fire at targets she could barely see through the smoke. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard Damien shouting orders, coordinating what was left of his team, trying to create an escape route through sheer force of will. But the cartel kept coming, wave after wave, like they had infinite soldiers and infinite ammunition and infinite patience to grind Damien's resistance into dust. Lucia's rifle clicked empty. She dropped it and pulled her Glock, firing at a cartel soldier who got too close. The shot caught him in the shoulder. He spun but didn't go down, raised his weapon toward her. Sophia appeared from nowhere and put 2 bullets in his head. "Stay down!" Sophia shouted, dragging Lucia behind better cover. "We're getting massacred out there. We need to retreat now, or we're all dead." "Where's Damien?" Lucia gasped. "Fighting his way toward the west exit. If we can—" An explosion cut her off. Not from the cartel. From above. Lucia looked up in time to see the warehouse's second floor collapse. Steel beams groaned. Concrete crumbled. Everything came down in a cascading avalanche of debris and fire that buried half the cartel's reinforcements under tons of rubble. Through the settling dust, federal agents in tactical gear swarmed through every entrance. DEA, FBI, ATF. Dozens of them, moving with coordinated precision, shouting commands in English while cartel soldiers threw down weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Lucia stared in disbelief. Someone had tipped off the feds. Someone had coordinated a federal raid to hit the warehouse at the exact moment Damien's assault turned into a massacre. But who? Sophia grabbed her arm. Move! Now! Before the feds realize we're not supposed to be here! They ran. Lucia stumbled through smoke and chaos, following Sophia toward an emergency exit, while federal agents swarmed past them, focused on securing cartel prisoners. Nobody stopped them. Nobody even looked twice at two women in tactical gear fleeing a crime scene. Outside, Damien's surviving soldiers were piling into what remained of the convoy. Lucia counted quickly. 9 left, down from 23. More than half their team dead or captured. But they'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, they'd survived. Damien emerged from the smoke, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, his suit torn and scorched. He saw Lucia, and something like relief flooded his expression. "You're alive," he said. "So are you." "The feds?" "I know. Someone called them. Set up a simultaneous raid, saved our asses." Damien's eyes narrowed. "Sophia?" Sophia shook her head. "Not me, boss. I would have told you." "Then who?" A black sedan pulled up beside the convoy. The back window rolled down to reveal an older man in an expensive suit, gray hair, sharp eyes. The kind of face that belonged to someone who'd spent decades navigating power structures most people never saw. "That would be me," the man said. Damien's expression went cold. "Anthony." "Hello, Damien. It's been a while." Lucia looked between them, trying to understand. "Who is this?" "Anthony Castellano," Damien said quietly. "My father." The words hit like a physical blow. Lucia had heard stories about Damien's father, the previous crime lord who'd retired 5 years ago and disappeared into legitimate business, leaving his empire to his son, the man who'd built everything Damien inherited, and apparently the man who'd just saved their lives. Anthony smiled. "I've been watching your little war with interest. The cartel made a mistake going after you. They thought you were isolated, weak. They didn't realize you still had family willing to step in when things got desperate." "You called in the feds," Damien said. "I made some phone calls. Explained that a major cartel operation was going down tonight in Jersey City. Suggested they might want to coordinate with your assault for maximum impact. They were very receptive. You set up a joint operation without telling me." "I saved your life," Anthony corrected. "You were walking into a slaughter. 50 soldiers turned into 80 when they brought reinforcements. You would have been dead in 20 minutes. So yes, I intervened. You're welcome." Damien's jaw clenched. "I didn't ask for your help." "You never do. That's always been your problem. Too proud to ask, too stubborn to accept. But you're my son, and despite everything between us, I'm not going to stand by and watch you die in a warehouse fighting a war you can't win." "I could have won." "Well, no," Anthony interrupted. "You couldn't. The cartel had you beat on numbers, resources, and planning. They'd infiltrated your organization so deeply you didn't even know who to trust anymore. You needed help. I provided it. Now the cartel's leadership is in federal custody, their product is seized, and their East Coast operation is destroyed. You won. Accept it." Silence stretched between father and son. Heavy with years of unspoken conflict and complicated history, Lucia couldn't begin to understand. Finally, Damien exhaled. "Thank you." Anthony nodded. "You've got talent, Damien. You've built something impressive, but you've also made enemies, powerful ones. If you're going to survive long-term, you need to transition out of this life entirely. Go legitimate. Use your connections and intelligence for something that won't get you killed before you're 50. "I know," Damien said quietly. "I'm already working on it." Anthony's eyes flicked toward Lucia. "Is she the reason?" "Part of it." "Good. Everyone needs a reason to change. Make sure you don't waste it." Anthony's driver started the engine. "The feds are going to sweep this area thoroughly. I'd suggest leaving before they start asking questions about why Damien Castellano's people were involved in a federal raid." The sedan pulled away, disappearing into the night like a ghost returning to wherever powerful men went when they stopped being criminals and started being respectable. Damien turned to his remaining soldiers. "Get in. We're going home." The safe house felt emptier with half the team gone. Survivors gathered in the main room, cleaning weapons and treating wounds and trying to process the fact that they'd walked into hell and somehow walked back out. Lucia sat in the corner, her hands still shaking from adrenaline crash, watching Damien coordinate cleanup operations with the exhausted efficiency of someone who'd survived too many wars. Sophia approached and sat beside her. "You did good tonight." "I barely survived. Survival counts as good in this business." Sophia's expression was serious. "You know what comes next, right? The feds arrested the cartel's leadership, their operations destroyed. But that creates a power vacuum. Other organizations will try to fill it. There's going to be instability, competition, maybe another war." "And Damien?" "Damien's got a choice. Double down and fight for control of the territory, or step back and let someone else have it while he transitions to legitimate operations. What do you think he'll do?" Sophia looked across the room at Damien, who was speaking quietly into his phone, his expression carved from exhausted stone. "I think he'll surprise you. He's been looking for an exit strategy for years. Maybe this is finally it." 2 hours later, after the soldiers had dispersed and the safe house had emptied, Lucia found Damien alone in his office, staring at financial projections on his laptop screen. "You should be sleeping," she said. "Can't. Too much to process." Damien closed the laptop and rubbed his face. "We lost 14 people tonight. Good people who trusted me to lead them into battle and bring them home. Instead, I got them killed walking into a trap I should have seen coming." "Your father saved us." "My father saved me because he didn't want his legacy dying in a Jersey warehouse. That's different." Lucia crossed to the desk and sat on the edge, close enough to touch him. "You can't carry every death like it's your fault. Those soldiers knew the risks. They chose to fight, just like I did, just like Sophia did. You didn't force anyone. I built an empire that required violence to maintain, that put everyone around me at risk just by association. The blood's on my hands whether I pulled the trigger or not." "Then change it," Lucia said simply. "You told me you wanted to build something legitimate, something that helps people instead of bleeding them. So do it. The cartel's gone. Your organization's damaged but intact. You've got resources and connections and intelligence. Use them to create something different. It's not that simple. It never is. But you're the one who taught me that predators decide what they want and take it. So decide right now, what do you want your empire to become?" Damien looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face like she held answers he'd been looking for his entire life. "I want to build something we can be proud of," he said finally. "International trade, legitimate imports. Use the connections I've got to broker deals between companies that need distribution networks. Turn violence into commerce. Blood into profit that doesn't require anyone dying. And the criminal operations? I dismantle them, sell off the assets, pay out the people who worked for me, and give them the option to transition into legitimate roles or walk away with enough money to start over." He paused. "It'll take time, maybe years, but I'm done building empires on bodies." Lucia felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. "When do we start?" "We? You think I'm walking away now? After everything? I negotiated my first international contract 3 days ago. Turns out I'm good at this. So yeah, we, partners, building something together." Damien stood and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to collapse. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Lucia agreed, "but you're stuck with me anyway." He kissed her then, not with the desperate intensity of the rooftop, but with something slower, deeper. The kind of kiss that felt like promises being made without words. When they finally pulled apart, the sky outside was lightening toward dawn. Another day survived, another chance to build something better than what came before. Mes. 6 months later, Lucia stood in the conference room of Castellano International Trade headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, watching Damien close a deal with a German manufacturing company worth $15 million. The negotiation had taken 3 hours. No guns, no threats, no violence. Just intelligence, strategy, and the kind of business acumen that transformed hostile parties into profitable partnerships. When the German executives finally signed the contract, everyone shook hands and smiled like they'd just become best friends, instead of competitors who'd been trying to destroy each other's margins for the better part of a morning. After they left, Damien turned to Lucia with an expression of exhausted satisfaction. That's 12 major contracts this quarter. Revenue's up 40% from last year. All legitimate, all legal. And the criminal operations? Completely dismantled. The last warehouse sold 3 weeks ago. Everyone who worked for me got severance packages and job placement assistance. Some stayed, some left. Nobody got left behind. Lucia smiled. You did it. Built something legitimate. We did it, Damien corrected. You negotiated half those contracts. Your language skills and cultural intelligence are the only reason half those companies agreed to work with us. This is as much yours as mine. Director of International Relations, Lucia said, looking at the brass nameplate on the conference room door. Not bad for a waitress. You were never just a waitress. You just hadn't found the right stage yet. Lucia walked to the windows and looked out at Manhattan, stretching in every direction. Millions of people living and working and building and destroying, all of it flowing together in the endless chaos that made the city feel alive. Somewhere out there, the cartel's former territory had been absorbed by other organizations. New wars were brewing, new empires rising and falling, but she and Damien weren't part of that world anymore. They'd stepped out of the darkness and into something resembling daylight. It wasn't perfect. Damien still carried the weight of the people he'd lost. Lucia still woke up sometimes from nightmares about gunfire and bodies and Marco's betrayal. The past didn't just disappear because you decided to change, but they were building something real, something that didn't require violence to sustain, and that felt like victory even if it looked nothing like the stories promised it would. Damien joined her at the windows, slipping his hand into hers. I've been thinking about something. What's that? Starting a foundation. Using some of the profits to fund education programs in underserved communities, scholarship funds for kids who need a way out of the life I spent 30 years living. Give them options I never had. Lucia turned to face him fully. That's a good idea, a really good idea. You want to help run it? Obviously. Damien smiled, a real smile this time, not the cold calculation or exhausted grimace she'd seen so often in the early days. We'll call it the Moretti Foundation, after your grandmother, the woman who taught you the language that saved my life. Lucia's throat tightened. She would have liked that. Knowing something she gave me ended up helping other people. She gave you more than language. She gave you strength, resilience, the ability to survive in a world that tried to make you invisible. Those are the things we'll teach, not just academics, but how to stand up, how to fight back, how to transform survival into something powerful. When do we start? Soon. First, we need to stabilize the business. Make sure the transition to legitimate operations is permanent. Then we build the foundation on solid ground instead of shifting sand. Lucia nodded. She understood the need for patience, for building carefully instead of rushing into something that might collapse. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. There's something else, Damien said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box and held it between them like an offering. I know this isn't traditional. I know we've only been doing this for 6 months, but we've lived through more in that time than most people experience in a lifetime, and I don't want to wait anymore. Lucia's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew what was in the box before he opened it. Damien dropped to one knee right there in the conference room, surrounded by contracts and projections and the machinery of legitimate business they'd built together from the ruins of violence. Lucia Moretti, he said quietly, you saved my life. You gave me a reason to become someone better. You stood beside me through war and betrayal and nights when survival felt impossible. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Will you marry me? Lucia looked down at the man who'd transformed from crime lord to legitimate businessman, who'd chosen her partnership over empire, who'd proven that change was possible even when the world insisted people like them couldn't escape what they'd been. She whispered. Damien stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her while Manhattan glittered through the windows and the city hummed with life and possibility and the promise that sometimes, just sometimes, people who started in darkness could find their way toward light. The wedding took place 6 months later in a small ceremony overlooking the Hudson River. No massive guest list, no public spectacle, just close friends, family, and the few people who'd survived the wars and chosen to stay. Sophia stood as Lucia's maid of honor, wearing an elegant dress that looked strange after months of seeing her in tactical gear. Damien's father attended, offering quiet approval and the kind of respect that came from watching your son choose a better path than the one you'd carved. The ceremony was simple, traditional vows modified to reflect lives that had never been traditional. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lucia kissed Damien beneath a sky that stretched forever, feeling like they'd finally earned something the world had tried desperately to deny them. Afterward, the small reception gathered in a restaurant that overlooked the water. Lucia stood on the terrace with a glass of champagne, watching boats drift past while conversations hummed behind her. Sophia joined her, her own glass in hand. "You look happy." "I am," Lucia said. "For the first time in my life, I actually am." "You earned it, both of you." Sophia took a sip of champagne. "You know the rumors, right? About Damien Castellano going legitimate. Half the city thinks it's a cover. The other half thinks he's lost his edge. Let them think whatever they want. We know the truth." "And what's that?" Lucia smiled. "That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from power everyone expects you to keep chasing. Damien could have rebuilt his criminal empire, could have fought for territory and spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Instead, he chose something harder, chose to change. Because of you. Because of both of us. I showed him it was possible. He showed me I was capable of more than I believed. We saved each other. That's the real story." Sophia raised her glass. "To saving each other." Lucia clinked her glass against Sophia's. "To surviving." Inside the restaurant, Damien was speaking with his father, their conversation quiet and serious. Lucia watched through the windows, seeing the way Damien's posture had changed over the past year. Less defensive, less weighted. He'd laid down the armor he'd worn for decades, and discovered he could survive without it. When he finally joined her on the terrace, the sun was setting across the Hudson, painting everything in shades of gold and amber that made the city look almost beautiful. "Your father okay?" Lucia asked. "He's proud. Said I made the right choice. Coming from him, that's high praise." "You did make the right choice." "We made the right choice," Damien corrected. He slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Everything from here forward, we build it together." Lucia leaned against him, watching the city transform in the fading light. Below them, people moved through streets and buildings, living lives they'd never see, fighting battles they'd never know about. The world kept turning. Violence kept happening. Empires kept rising and falling. But she and Damien had stepped out of that cycle. They'd chosen something different, something that didn't require blood to maintain. And standing on that terrace, with the man she'd saved and who'd saved her in return, Lucia understood something fundamental about survival. It wasn't about being the strongest or the most ruthless or the one willing to sacrifice everything. It was about finding someone worth surviving for, about building something together that transformed violence into purpose and fear into hope, about refusing to let the darkness win even when the world insisted darkness was all there was. "What are you thinking?" Damien asked quietly. Lucia smiled. "I'm thinking about my grandmother, about how she taught me a language that saved your life, about how one conversation in Sicilian changed everything, about how the smallest choices ripple outward in ways you can never predict." "You think she'd approve of all this?" "I think she'd be proud. She always said we survive. That's what our family does. But I think she'd be even more proud that we did more than just survive. We transformed survival into something worth living for." Damien kissed the top of her head. "She sounds like she was an incredible woman." "She was. And I wish she could have met you. Wish she could have seen what came from the language she gave me." "Maybe she can," Damien said. "Maybe somewhere she's watching and understanding that her granddaughter didn't just survive. She built an empire of her own, one that helps people instead of destroying them." Lucia closed her eyes, letting the moment wash over her. The warmth of Damien's arms, the sound of the river, the distant hum of the city. The knowledge that they'd made it through the fire and come out changed, but not broken. Behind them, music started playing. Their first dance as husband and wife. Damien led Lucia back inside, and they moved together across the floor while friends and family watched, and the future stretched ahead like an open road they'd travel together. No more running, no more hiding, no more violence required. Just two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and chosen to build something bright from the ashes. And as Lucia danced with her husband beneath lights that felt warmer than any she'd known before, She understood the truth her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Survival wasn't the end goal, it was just the beginning. What you did with survival, how you transformed it into meaning and purpose and love, that was what mattered. That was what separated existing from living. And Lucia Moretti had finally learned how to live. Not in the margins, not invisible, but standing center stage in a life she'd earned through courage and intelligence and the willingness to risk everything for a whispered warning that changed 2 lives forever. The song ended. Damien pulled her close. And somewhere across the river, Manhattan glittered with the promise that even in a city built on ambition and violence and the constant churn of empire, 2 people could find each other and build something that lasted. Something worth fighting for. Something worth surviving for. Something worth calling home.